I think that's like what is behind when it seems like I do a party trick, because I'll do like a little mini reading on someone, or they'll ask me, tell me about myself. And then I'll say a few things and then they're like, whoa. And I'm like, listen, at this point, it's just how it is. So I think like that has a lot to do with getting people to be interested at all, or just there's no more convincing happening. It's just, I'm going to present you with this and you take it how you want.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tejerian. What is up? Welcome to the Weekly Transit. I'm your host, Scott Tejerian, here with Aleen Khachatourian.
Hi.
What is up, Aleen? So great to have you here. Aleen is
so happy to be here.
Yeah, yes. Aleen and I have been working together for almost like 4 years now. And she is my Armenian sister, fellow Armenian. She's a Leo rising, Virgo moon, Pisces sun. So we're going to get into the deep waters here with my Pisces moon and her Pisces sun. Like, who knows where the conversation's going to lead, but we're just going to take the current and see where it leads us, because wherever it leads us will be in a divine direction. We have faith that it will be. Aleen is a very talented, creative individual. She's a creative producer at Moons Creative, and we're going to talk more about that. But I guess my first question for you is, what does your name mean, Khachatourian? What does that mean in Armenian?
So that's such a good question. So in Armenian, it would be pronounced Khachatourian with the ch, like that.
Khachatourian, yeah.
And a khach is a cross. So then Khachatur is the person who like bears the cross or brings the cross. At least that's the, definition that I know. If there's Armenians out there and it's like, you study this and you're like, that's wrong, tell us about it. But that's the meaning that I know. And, Armenians were Christian.
Yes,
so
the first Christian nation. And Khachatourian, did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, yeah.
So, great.
I mean, so you are of the one who bears the cross. Does that mean you're a descendant of Christ, or the first people of the first Christians of Armenia? I mean, my last name is I'm of the merchant.
Oh,
Tejerian. That's what I've been told. It's son of the merchant. So yeah, because everyone, like, if you don't know, all Armenians, their last name ends in either IAN or YAN, and it means son of, or of, whatever that. So Aleen is the son of the bearer of the cross, and I'm just the son of the town merchant selling goods and services to people.
Well, it's also very like, for me, what came up was Silk Road, like a merchant on the Silk Road,
totally.
which is very aligned with, you might not be a merchant, but you're consistently like interacting with all these people, and so connected to all these people. So I feel like that checks out for sure.
Well, I mean, it definitely fits with my lineage. Like, my grandfather, Ed Tejerian, he owned a clothing store, and then my dad took over the clothing store from my grandpa, and then when the clothing store went out of business, then my dad got into like real estate and then like financial planning. So yeah, but kind of the merchant vibe.
Yeah, I mean, Armenians were very industrious. It's like
Yes.
entrepreneurial and
Yes. Where
yeah,
does your
we have a
family come
network.
from? What part of Armenia, or were they? Do you have direct? Are you a direct descendant of a genocide survivor? Like, what is your story there?
So my family, one side I know the roots of originally came from the Edgmiatsian region, which is a little bit outside of Yerevan. And then there's the Edgmiatsian church, and that's like kind of our main hub church. And then there's all these other monasteries in Armenia. So they were there. And then I don't know the exact dates, but I want to say it's like 500-600 years ago when Shah Abbas came and took from Iran, the Persian Empire, took all these Armenians as slaves to come and make their country better. And so my family, both sides, were taken. We don't know where my mom's roots are coming from as the Armenians, but basically then they were in Iran for all of those years, and there were villages, but my parents and their parents are from Tehran, the capital of Iran. And then during the revolution in 78, they came here.
Okay.
So I'm a first generation. I'm not a direct descendant of someone from the genocide.
Because you were on the eastern side of Armenia.
Yes, and we were already out.
Yeah.
And, we kept the Armenianness very intact. And we had our church and our, Armenian center, and they went to Armenian school, all of those things. But we weren't from Armenia for a long time.
So you don't know how far back or what, like, your ancestors go in terms of like who was taken by the leader of Iran, like in your family. Was that like your great great grandparents or your great 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 grandparents?
I think it would be however many generations would fit in 500 to 600 years.
Oh wow!
We'd have to see
it's that long ago. Oh wow!
It's that long ago. I think it's about 6 or 6.5, because my dad's side, there's a tree. My mom's side, it's tricky because back in the days when they'd get born into the village, they'd have to travel to the nearest place where they did the bookkeeping of people who were born. And then often names got changed because it was hard for the people of Iran to maybe say it. So then there's a lot of that happened. So I've been asking my dad, give me that tree, I want it, because at least we know one side is in the Edgmiatsian region. But before that, I don't know. And then one side, who knows? So
wow.
I'm hoping to dig and find out more, because it's interesting. But regardless of all of that, we stayed very Armenian, for lack of a better way of saying it. So the identification, and we didn't really marry outside of it stayed very internal. So we kept that, and it was always growing up, I went to Armenian school, Armenian dance, all the things. And it was my mom put the fear of God in us. We didn't protect it for this long for you to forget.
Wow.
And we didn't. So it's, I can read, write, speak. It's so important to me.
Wow.
That stayed.
Yeah. That's amazing. So your family was in Iran for 500-600 years. And during that period, you held on to what it meant to be Armenian and carried that with you. So my experience is the complete opposite of yours. So all my family comes from Harput, which is in eastern Turkey now. And so, my dad's grandfather, his family, they came to the United States in the 1880s, after the first smaller genocide, or right before that one. and my grandma, my mom's mom, she was like you. She was the firstborn in America and came here in like the early 1900s. And my mom's dad, he was the one who his parents were killed in the genocide, and he came to the United States. He actually arrived here on July 4th, 1923 at Ellis Island, and didn't know his birthday. He'd spent the last 12 years, or not 12 years, like probably 7 years. He was like a Turkish slave, and then he escaped the Turkish owner and found his way with his brother to a orphanage in Lebanon, and that's where their eldest brother, who was in Chicago at the time, found them through the AGBU and brought them over to the United States. And didn't know his birthday, so they just put down 4th of July because that's what day it was. It's like a good American day. And so from that, it's like, my grandpa he was like 12, 13 years old when he was here, didn't know any English, started like in the first grade as like a 12, 13-year-old. And in 5 years, he was graduating from 8th grade. And then I think he made it through high school in a couple years. But he and my grandma, they wanted their children to be American. And so like my mom's oldest sister, she didn't know any English when she went to kindergarten. And it was a really kind of difficult experience for her. And they didn't want my mom to go through that. So they only spoke English in the home. And so learning Armenian was not a priority. Of course, they always ate Armenian foods and cuisine and went to Armenian church and that sort of stuff. But it was like my aunt's name is Georgia Jean and my mom is Margaret June, like very like almost like Southern names, that are like American names. And so Georgia Jean Hackelmasian and Margaret June Hackelmasian, it's like very antithetical to the experience that your family had, where it's like holding on to that tradition. And now I think there's some sadness around it because like I don't speak Armenian and my mom doesn't speak Armenian. No one speaks Armenian. And so, yeah, it's just a different experience. When my grandpa came to this country, he didn't, people were prejudiced against Armenians, so they tried to fit in. Like my grandma, her dad changed his last name from Barbarian to Barber so he could get work because it sounded American. So, yeah.
There's a lot of stories like that. People I even grew up with, and there's a few factors. One is like when they were living in maybe Western Armenia, there wasn't the same type of like, we need to, with us, it was like so long ago that we were taken, and it was still Western Armenia at that time.
Yeah.
So there's not as much, I don't think, of a need to like protect but then coming over here and then there's not acceptance of it. And they want them to get ahead because they just escaped. So it makes total sense that they would be more about assimilating. And because if this was happening in today's world, that wouldn't even be a question, because people from like Yerevan, Armenia come here to Glendale and they're like, it feels the same pretty much. I mean, obviously there's differences, but like for example, my grandma, who came a bit after my mom did, so early 80s, couple years, and there was the revolution was happening in Iran, and my grandma still has the same English vocabulary she did when she first came, because she hasn't had to work here because everything has been, she's been, at that age, it's like taken care of. And she goes to the Armenian markets, the Armenian hairdresser. you don't really need to.
Right.
If you're coming here alone, sure, but even still, like, the network here is so strong. And that's also, I think, a part of why when I think about where else would I live, it's really tough for me to be like, I wouldn't be based out of LA. I have my entire network
Yes,
here.
exactly.
So that has a lot to do with it, I think. And then there's all this discourse you go through as an Armenian because your identity is like removed from whence we came. So it's like, there used to be this thing of like, oh, if you don't speak Armenian, then we've moved away from that. Then it's like, oh, if you're not 100%, I think we've moved away from all of that. I think if you want to be Armenian and you are feeling that way, then you're Armenian.
That's comforting, because I always felt like an outsider my blood is 3/4 Armenian. So, but I don't look like maybe most Armenians do. Like, I don't think, at least like growing up, I had really auburn reddish hair, and but my grandpa, who's from Armenia, he had blue eyes, but the way that he spoke was very Armenian, like he spoke English but with a heavy accent. But I always felt like kind of an outsider around Armenians, because I didn't grow up around a lot of Armenians, except outside of family. It was family, and then I went to an Armenian church till I was 10 years old, but then we stopped going to that church and we started going to a normal Presbyterian Protestant church, and it was no Armenians there. So I felt like an outsider to my own heritage, even though like when I was at my grandma's house and spending with family, like we'd be eating Armenian foods, and there would be that culture. But I remember when I first moved to LA in the late 90s, if ever I'd meet an Armenian person, I'd say I'm Armenian. They'd look at me like, "You're Armenian? How are you Armenian?" And I'm like, "Well, my last name is Tejerian." They're like, they wouldn't believe me. I'd have to show them my driver's license, and then I'm like, "Do you want to see my back hair too?" Like, that will maybe that will prove something to you, So, but yeah, I felt like an outsider, and but I think it has kind of softened, like you said, over the last 25 years or so. People are more accepting, and maybe the Armenian community is becoming more inclusive to other Armenians that are not exactly like them. So,
well, I mean, even growing up, and I went to Armenian school, and we had, there was Persian Armenian, there was Lebanese Armenian, there was Armenian Armenians, and we had a lot of us from each grouping. It wasn't like there was like two. And we still, within each other, it was like, oh, they would make fun of like the Parska, like Mama, Papa, and Lavan or whatever.
What does it say? What does that all mean?
So Mama and Papa and Lavan is asking like, how are your mom and dad doing? Like, are they well? But that's, I guess, something that Persian Armenians might say more, and then there's even discourse in like, they'll say, no, you're not Persian Armenian, you're Iran-Ahai. Like that means you're Armenia from Iran. But all my life, I grew up saying Parska-Hai. But that means so there's the layers of like, let's separate go so deep. But I think that as we're, going into just evolution in general, it's definitely seeping in. And I think to me, I've come to a point where if you feel like you're Armenian and you want to connect to the culture, then there shouldn't be barriers of entry for that kind of stuff. I think that's silly, especially because of how much turmoil there is geopolitically in that region. And it has always kind of been. And that there's more Armenians outside of Armenia than there are inside. There's so many layers, and I'm not a scholar and I'm not at all a professional in this. So that's not where the conversation is going to go. But I think just that fact alone, it's silly to me to still have these like barriers of separation.
You're so advanced, your generation, because Armenian culture has really suffered, I feel like, for a long time from like tall poppy disease, where it's like if one of the poppies starts to stand too tall, we got to chop it down with the rest of the group. And you're talking about inclusion and empowerment of individuals within the group. What is that like for you? I mean, what is your experience growing up first generation in America? Because I think it's very different from like my mom, who's also first generation, and from her father. I mean, I guess my grandma, my mom's mom, was first generation too, but like what was that like for you? Is there a disconnect between you and your parents because of the differences in your upbringing, or how do you connect with them in a way that feels supportive of both of you? What does all that mean?
That's a really great question. I think my experience growing up was for the first, how old, until I was 13, I went to Armenian school pretty much with the same group. And my schools were right next to each other, the preschool and so that alone it was simple enough in terms of like when you're sheltered within the community, you're not really going to, plus like I'm pretty white passing, if we want to go there with it. Like I know that I look exotic, but I think that I look passable enough where I didn't really feel scrutiny in terms of like appearance identity goes. I think it also helps when you're a girl. There's like layers there, but growing up when you're in that sheltered kind of pod, I wasn't experiencing like being turned away somewhere or I can't get along with. I did have a little bit of an accent when I went to school, but it was all Armenian.
Yeah, so it didn't matter. Yeah, because they're all speaking with an accent.
I also was in school, like I started preschool at 18 months. So I was very young. And so there was, I think in general, having a year on top of everybody else was helpful to be just socialized really early. And then once I went to high school, I actually went to high school with a few of my people from the other school, and there were Armenians, and it was a private school. So like, it wasn't that crazy to experience other cultures. There was still a little bit of that because I hadn't been around other cultures really on a regular basis.
Yes.
And it was also a multicultural school, right? You had Filipinos, Japanese, Korean, Hispanic.
That was high school or the Armenian school?
That was high school.
And you went to a private high school?
I went to a private high school.
But it was an Armenian high school. It was...
No. Yeah. But there were Armenians that went to the high school.
But it was multicultural. There was a lot of different races there.
There was a lot of different races. And I also think that in general, I always felt kind of like an alien amongst the humans in general. So even going to school early on, like I was always friends with a lot of different groups. So that same thing transferred for me. Like when I went to high school, I wasn't in the Armenian group. I was actually with the other groups. So that was it. Because it was like also, I had my people outside the school. So my eggs were always in like different baskets. And then I would say, going back to the question of like, what was the big difference between, well, my parents both came here having spent, like my mom came here when she was 14, my dad 18. So,
and they didn't know each other before they came here, or they, okay, yeah.
No, but they're both from Tehran. And like, then it was, then they realized, oh, we know the group. Same thing that happens here. But they met here, through friends. My dad went to college in Austin, Texas. So that
Where do you go to school?
He went to UT.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he had like, it was like early 80s. Like he
That's
did
an
the whole
American
thing.
experience right there.
Punky, like he went to Willie Nelson's barbecue. Like just his stories are like the crazy stuff. And then my mom, she had to do the thing where like she took a bus to school. They came to the valley. Like, so she experienced what it was like to know both of them. They didn't really know English. And they then had to just learn. And she would say, like, I would sit in front of the TV with my dictionary. And that's how I learned. And so they did have different experiences. And I'm sure that they experienced some sort of, not bullying, but I'm sure they have their own stories. But if you see my parents, they're both pretty like white passing. So I feel like that has something to do with it.
They've been Americanized.
They're Americanized.
Yeah.
And also my dad's, like there was some family here and there was some family here for my mom. So they didn't have a fully fresh experience either. They had people to like stay with. And so,
To
but
show
still,
them the ropes.
They had to make it still.
Yeah, of course. But they had a support system here to help them along the way. How did they meet each other?
They met through friends.
Yeah. Before or after college?
Going out. So I want to say it was after college for my dad because he's 4 years older than her.
Yeah.
And it was at the tail end of college for my mom.
Where'd she go to school?
She went to Valley College and then CSUN.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So they had that whole experience. And I think, I had it pretty made for me in terms of that stuff goes. I've never had to take a bus. Like when I say sheltered, it's like, it was always very safe for me growing up. And they're the reason for that is they made it so that those basic things of survival are taken care of. And then the rest is up to me. Kind of a thing.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
I love it, man. What is LA? Well, first of all, I want to say, like you mentioned that you felt like you were an alien, and that's very Pisces of you. Like I feel like Pisces is the alien sign. It's so ethereal, and you have this sort of exotic alien look to you, very ethereal. You pick up those energies from people, places, and things. And so, like, being a Pisces, being an Armenian, what is it like living in Los Angeles and so many people from so many different places on earth all together here? What is that like for you? What does LA feel like to you?
Most of my life, it's been really overwhelming and just really tiring. I think as a Pisces sun, especially, you have to work very hard on your boundaries. And, my journey with you in the picture has been so amazing because you've helped me, and I have my Mercury in Pisces. So it's a lot of things and then I know I'm jumping a little. Then there's I do have a lot of heady, like the airy placement. So there's the Virgo and the Mercurial and the Aquarius. So there's headiness. But with a Pisces Mercury, I feel like, because for those who don't know, it's Neptune and it's the cloudy planet, and that's one of the rulers of Pisces. And so I think a lot of times why astrology can be really helpful is it helps you just lay everything on the table and take like a bird's eye view look, and also be able to zoom in and get more granular and work on a certain area. So it's these two things simultaneously happening. And when you can decode that, it helps you have like a roadmap to yourself. And so that, being a Pisces and having to work on your boundaries, it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I'm not consistently having to like put up hard boundaries because now it's something that I move from and I can anticipate. Like, I know that event will just be way too much with the 5 other things I have lined up. Or I used to stack my day up. I would have thing after thing.
That's your Virgo moon. Scheduling it
phone
all
call
in.
after phone call, talking to a bunch of people. Like, I can't do that every single day. So being a Pisces, growing up in LA, in the Armenian community, it's a lot. It's like you have to show up for many different roles, multiple hats. Our generation is helping, I think, to bring into the conversation, like, what are boundaries and what is self-care and what is like communicating your needs and feelings. And now the way that, for example, my family, the way we talk to each other and how we resolve conflict and how we understand each other is not where it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Because now it's like it's in their conversation more to be like, she needs this type of thing and this person feels this way. And so I think that that's also shifting within the community. But growing up, it's also hard because when you don't have boundaries or that's something you struggle with because you want to connect with everything. If you don't know how to like protect yourself, you just pick everything up like a sponge. And then when you're young, like I know in Vedic or in India, they get readings when they're very young, like from 5 years old. I think that would be something to implement in general.
Yes.
If parents start to get into that more, because if I understood myself like I do through this lens back in the day, it would have just been a whole different experience. And we can always say like, oh, this could have happened, that. More to say that like the quicker this stuff gets integrated, just the more peaceful and easily you're able to move through your day.
Yes. So I love that. It's so true, So when did you find out you were a Pisces? When did you first learn about astrology?
I was young.
Yeah.
Because my parents, I have the book here. It's this really cool, like old astrology book. So I had that in the house since I can remember. And I knew that I was a Pisces, probably like from maybe as early as 12, 13.
Okay, yeah.
My aunt is also a Pisces. So it's funny. My aunt, she's my uncle's wife. She's a Pisces and her birthday is 2 days apart from mine. And then my mom and my cousin,
her daughter, your aunt's daughter,
are a day apart, and they're both Taurus. So it's just really interesting, to have that. And so my aunt, I always really connected with her because, she was like a mom figure, but she was also kind of a friend, and she was also, and I think that as Pisces sons, we have an ability to do that and to be all these different people for the people in our lives, like possibly a little more integrated than other signs. I mean, everyone kind of does that. And I also feel like people just like open up and tell their lives to me all the time. From like strangers to they meet me and like everything just comes out. So it's been interesting to like work on not taking all of that on, or you do, I think a tool that's really helpful for that is like being in the observer as much as you can be. And detachment has really helped me being a Pisces sun.
Well, that's the support that you get for all the, you have 3 planets in Aquarius. And this is what I was also thinking about when you were saying earlier, how when you went to high school, you already had all the Armenian community and friends. So you started intermingling with the other cultures. And that is the more the Aquarius vibe, where it's like, I want to try something different. That also brings the detachment. That's the balance of the signs, where just before Pisces, the sign before Pisces is Aquarius. Aquarius is very detached. Pisces is very compassionate. So they're kind of antithetical to each other. They're different from one another, but it's something that most Pisces people will get. They're either going to get a little bit of that Aquarius, or they're going to get a little bit of that Aries, which Aries is all about the self, because those are the two signs that are next to Pisces, and Mercury is never more than one sign away from the sun, and Venus is never more than two signs away from the sun. And so your Venus is in Aquarius when your sun is in Pisces for you, Aleen. Yeah.
It's also, the Armenians, I think in high school, it wasn't that they didn't accept me. I just didn't feel like necessarily there was a come join. It was like they were cool with me, but I recognized that, and I was like, no problem. I also was like,
weren't you more interested? You were more interested in learning about the other cultures, though, yes? Or
I was. Yeah. I also was in choir. That I did choir all 4 years. Really nerdy, but that was a big part of it. So then I was friends with the people also that were doing the hobbies that I was on the paper. So there was a little bit of that. I think also going back to maybe the Pisces in nature, it's like as I've gotten older, this has changed. But in the beginning, it was like things that were in my immediate radius and pretty accessible is what I would kind of be like, okay, cool. Like we're doing this now. Cool. And so, for example, I think for a sensitive soul like me and other sensitive souls, potentially a smaller space, a smaller school is the move. Because thinking about being in a sea of thousands in high school, even now, doesn't sound great to me. Even college was small. I've never been to a school that was bigger.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Glendale College, so community college, which was arguably the biggest school I'd been to. And then I went to Woodbury, and that's a small...
What is that?
I don't know, it's
Woodbury.
That's a private university.
Where is that?
And it's
in LA?
That's in Burbank.
Burbank, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that was the furthest. Well, actually, even Providence, my high school, was in Burbank. So that's the furthest I ventured,
the neighboring city.
Yeah. It's just So anyways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had a kind of, even though you said in India, they give readings to kids when they're 5, 6, you were still learning about astrology at age 12. That's still pretty young. So how did that sort of evolve for you to where you are now?
I think for the first patch of life with astrology was the Pisces and amethyst is my stone and blues are the colors. It was more just the very topical stuff and horoscopes, daily horoscopes. And then I think it was after college even when I discovered there's a rising. And so a big chunk of it was just the typical stuff. And then once I think you were probably getting introduced to you was really the start of the second layer. And so you've been there basically for the deeper part of the journey.
Yes. Amazing. Yeah. Well, honored to be here, guiding you on this part of the journey. So how has astrology impacted your life in these last 3 years, 4 years, 4+ years that we've been working together?
4+. Yeah. I have to attribute a big chunk of my growth, progress, evolution, integration to astrology, and specifically working with you. And I don't say that of like, oh my God, we're just flattering. Like, no, truly, because of the way that, first of all, I think it's interesting that you're a man because astrology is very saturated by women. And I do follow and listen to women. It's not even about that. It's just, I think that there's a practical approach you bring to it that has helped me in integrating the lens. And so when I like when I can communicate to anyone about anything. So if something's too woo-woo or lofty or whatever, it's great if you're in a certain kind of setting. But if, to me, like being of the biggest service and having the most impact in general in everyday life in different conversations is when you can distill it in a way that kind of anyone can understand.
So you're saying that what you've learned through working with me and astrology is like it's become more practical for you, where it's like kind of something that's a part of your everyday and you're able to communicate it to people in your life that maybe wouldn't necessarily be predisposed to wanting to listen to or care about what astrology is saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
I also think that it's helped me hack myself in a way, because
what do you mean by that?
Well, one thing I'll say is that it's like anything, it works if you work it. So I've consistently, since 2020, we started doing the moon readings, but the moon cycle classes, and then we did the cosmic pathway for a bit. Like the consistent showing up and embedding it into the everyday, every week, that has been one of the biggest things that has made an impact. But also because once you've helped me understand, okay, this is why I operate the way I operate. And then this is the big picture goal. And this is the thing that your path is like, you're going to be most satisfied and most fulfilled, you know, the North Node stuff. Like and also like, these are where the gifts are. This is the hidden stuff. Look at this. And in the beginning, you get a reading and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to, but then it's not, you don't stay in that place because again, it's a practical approach, but it's also deep. So it's kind of like if therapy and life coaching merged. That's like the closest, I think, practical way that I can describe it for people, because there's action in it. It's not a passive thing, but it also makes it okay for you to just, first step, like you always say, it's understanding, compassion, and love. And if you can meet yourself with that, and also this is something that I think everyone can benefit from. It's like, go easy on the hard days and go hard on the easy days.
Yes.
And like if I have a Virgo moon and it's like I have a lot of sixth house. I'm critical. I'm really, really hard on myself. But I think pre us meeting and working together, everything was like jumbled up in a knot. So everything was happening all at once, all the time. And there was no deciphering, like, why am I feeling like this? And there was no baseline. So it's like when we started working together, it's like a doctor. You went in and you were like, this is the analysis and the diagnostic report. And then now we can work towards like whatever you want to work towards. But I'm just telling you, this is what I see.
Yes. So what are can you give some specific examples about how your life has changed through really learning to practice this ancient language of astrology and to make it a part of your daily life?
Yeah, so I think that understanding where my gifts lie in a not just a abstract way, like, oh, you're so talented. Okay, but where do I shine? Okay, For example, like I'm a Leo rising. So with Leo rising placements, you're automatically, there's something about you that's magnetic, whether it's to the eye, whether it's your energy. So I realized like, okay, I don't need to necessarily do a specific thing. It's not like now go be an actress or go be a this and you're on the stage, but it's like, how can I shine that Leo rising warmth in the settings I go into, right? But also being a Pisces sun and a Virgo moon, I'm not always in the mood. So that's the other thing, is understanding how I operate and how to honor those parts of myself. So for me, it helps me to think of it like, who's more in charge today, or who needs which placement's inner child is not feeling up to the job today, and how can we support her? So ironically, in feeling more integrated, I've had to kind of create a little bit of separation so I can decipher what's going on. Like today, I need to have a chill day. And so let's say I get a text from a friend that says, let's hang out later. And if I don't feel it, me going and hanging out is not going to be the best thing for everyone involved. But in the past, what would I have done? I would have just, without thinking, said yes, because maybe there's FOMO or because I want to, but I'm not honoring my need in that moment.
Well, it sounds like you talked earlier about boundaries and the need for boundaries with Pisces. It's like you have to create your own boundaries. And so it sounds like because you are aware of your soft spots and where you have strengths, you recognize that, as a seventh house sun, you want to be in relationship. You identify with your relationships, whether it's a lover, a friend, a business partner. That's how you identify. As a Leo rising, you want to come off as like, oh, everything's great. I'm the sun, but you have to honor that inner Pisces frequency that says, is my pool overflowing right now? Like, I don't know if I can add more water to what I'm already carrying. So it's understanding that you're already at the brim. And even though you have a friend that wants to hang out and you want to seem like everything's all sunny day, you are going to say, I need to have a boundary here where I'm going to have to pass on hanging out today. Whereas in the past, you would have just been like, if they're offering, then I'm saying yes. Like, I don't say no to anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
I also think that there's one of the biggest key points that I think is really underlooked at when you're deep in astrology and you're studying it, you're looking at this. But most of the general people, there's not even a North Node that's mentioned. And that's the other thing that I think has been so crucial in the timing of when we met, because it was a few years before my Saturn return. So we were doing a lot of foundational work. And then when that came, and the Saturn return is going to shake you up. And then really identifying with my North Node, which is a Capricorn in the 5th house, for those listening, if there are those out there. So that has helped too, because that's a big part of like this next phase of life. And moving towards that. And also like with Pisces, we are so go with the flow. But what happens when you're, I think, younger as a Pisces sun, 7th house, it's like you almost don't realize how much agency you need to move from. So you're not just like, I'm not going to be pulled by anything and everyone nowadays. And you helped me really frame, what does it mean to be a Capricorn North Node in the 5th house?
Yeah.
What does it, the goat, and setting the goals and climbing the mountain. And if you're coming with me and you're going to support the goal, amazing. I love it. Come along. But if that's not going to happen, I can't take on the dead weight.
Yeah.
so that, and then if we're speaking like practical too, with the Virgo moon, and there's the sixth house, there's a lot of, and my Jupiter's in Virgo.
Your Jupiter's in Virgo, and then your Saturn, your Mars, and Venus are all in the sixth house. So got a lot of Virgo frequency there. Yeah.
If I don't, Virgo is about daily routine. It's about diet, your job, health, exercise. If I don't tend to those on a daily basis and be very, not like super strict where it's critical, but there's non-negotiables through the day. And if I don't do that over time, I don't start to feel my best, and that affects everything else.
Well, what's interesting for you is your sixth house is also in Capricorn. So your North Node is in Capricorn, your sixth house is in Capricorn. So the sixth house in Capricorn, that means that you really need to create a structure for your daily life. Like, what is my goal today? What is my goal this week? What is my goal this month, this year? And always kind of having a plan for each day that's working towards something. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it's important too, because most of our charts, I think people are going to feel like there's so much paradox. And how do you, because
the Virgo moon and the Pisces sun, they're opposite each other. One's the dreamer and the other one's the practical. Yeah, exactly.
And it's like any good story, any movie you watch, any story, there has to be conflict.
Yes, inner conflict and external conflict. Yes, both.
Inner, outer, and it doesn't have to be dramatic,
right?
Necessarily, but every day, right? So it's like, I think it's important to remember, for example, for my Virgo moons out there, for my sixth house placements, yes, the routine, yes, the things, but this is a consistent note I get both from myself and like people that I talk to. It's like, leave a little wiggle room, because what happens is, like, as an extremist that I am, I'm either like in robot mode or I'm like in La La Land. And thankfully, with your help and all of these tools, we've come more in the middle. So I don't lose I don't identify with that much anymore. But it's important, like, throughout the day, I have things that are non-negotiables that I do, but I leave myself a few hours to just flow, because then what happens when I restrict too much, Saturn coming in hot there, is that I want to rebel, as my Aquarian placements will do. And then it's just not, there's just too much pushback and too much elbowing around. And that's not, we can all get along. So it helps me to think of them all as little beings. And we can all, I'm the queen and the leader, but I need to listen to them too, because they're going to push my agenda along.
It sounds like you're learning to, like, kind of compartmentalize different parts of yourself and honor different parts of yourself, even if these different parts are in conflict with each other. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you about, like, what you're doing with Moon's Collective, and, like, what is this, or Moon's Creative? So what does it mean to be a creative director or a creative producer? What is Moon's Creative? What do you guys do? It's an Armenian-owned company. Is that?
It's an Armenian-owned and operated company. We are a boutique creative agency. So that's the big umbrella. We're based kind of all over internationally, but our headquarters, I would say, is in LA. And we, to put it like simply, it's like we help brands and people and personal brands and businesses. We help them evolve and elevate their digital presence. So we make content from scratch, ideation to producing it, executing it, and then there's the finished product. We mostly work for social media, like on the social media platforms, but we are a pretty well-oiled production house. So we could pretty much produce whatever you needed.
Mm-hmm. Now you've spent a lot of time living in Armenia over the last couple of years. And so are you working with people in Armenia through Moon's Creative, or is there?
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of our team is based in Armenia. We have a lot of talented editors that are based in Armenia and Russia. And so, like that team is there, and then we communicate with them. I also have worked on a few other projects that are based in Armenia, a recording studio, label, small house like that. And just connecting over there. I think my time in Armenia was really first and foremost about me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also cool that those things lined up. But it was a really cool experience to just get to pick up and live there for half a year.
Yeah.
I did that 2 years in a row. And then I did another year, a few years before that. It's interesting because I don't have any family there, but because everybody pretty much is Armenian, it felt very familial and familiar. But because also, they're Armenians from Armenia and I'm not, that was also still, I was like, oh, I'm here and I feel like you guys, but I also, again, it's the alien thing again coming up. There's just so many things that are different that you wouldn't realize until you're there.
Like
what? Everything. I mean, first of all, even city-wise.
It's a small town compared to LA, right?
It's a small town and you walk everywhere, like going and getting my bread in the mornings, getting my eggs and my produce and walking it up. I didn't have a car over there. Uh-huh. And then even just like everybody, it's very safe there. So kids are running around. And when I went to Armenia for the first time, I was 12. And I remember like we stayed there for a month and all my family had come from different places because my cousin was getting married. And so it was like I had never experienced where, the parents, I see my mom in the morning and whatever, and then I go off with my friends for the whole day. No cell phones, nothing.
So you had a lot of freedom there as a child when you were there. It was more so than, okay. So, but continue, yeah.
Everybody is Armenian, so and everyone kind of somehow has a connection. So like, there's not really funny business in terms of how, like, there's not like kidnapping and things like that because you go, it's like the grandma over there and she'll come and give you fruit, or like, oh, the grandpa over there will help you because your shoe is untied. Like, it's like that kind of energy. So that was a big wow for me. And I felt the same way going there. Again, it's really safe as a woman as in terms of like physical danger like that. Like, I wasn't here. I would never walk at night. I just would never do that.
Yeah.
It's even if, let's say, my neighborhood is really safe, it's just there's so much extra risk involved being a woman that like at night it sounds kind of wild, you know?
Yeah.
So that was a big difference. What else?
I mean, is there no crime in Armenia? Is that
There's crime. There's crime, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's framed the same way it is here. There's things obviously that happen everywhere, and they have their own internal kind of social code. The social code also is different there. Like here, as women, we're used to like, we'll go out at night, or, if you're drinking somewhere with your friends, like you're having a nice cocktail, that's not something necessarily you're looked at in a certain way. But over there, if you're out after a certain hour, or you're wearing a skirt, or it's like there are some of these archaic things. And again, I don't want to paint Armenia as like, but it's like anywhere. They have their own way that they've kind of, their own code.
So it's a little more
And
conservative in terms of how women are supposed to be dressing.
dressing,
Acting,
acting,
yeah.
you know, you don't really go out alone. You go out with a group, you go out with like a group of women, or that's big.
Mm-hmm.
And also, most everyone knows each other.
Mm.
So there's a lot of that too. It's like you just think about things a little differently when you're over there, how you're behaving, who you're talking to. There's a little bit of that, like, oh, did you see whoever was talking? Or like, there's a little bit of that.
Gossip.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's like that anywhere.
Sure.
It just depends on what group you're in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, wow. If you go to Armenia, do you have to speak Armenian?
No.
No. Okay.
It depends on the region. Like if you go to a village,
Yeah.
they might not know other English.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Russian, they pretty much know everywhere. And that's like the second language there.
Yeah.
But I mean, people know English. It's not like that spread, but you can get by. Like there are signs written in English.
Uh-huh.
And if this person doesn't know, that person will.
Uh-huh.
And like tourism is big there. People love going there. Love the food.
Yeah. Why would a tourist who's not Armenian want to go to Armenia? Want to go to Yerevan?
Yeah, I think number one thing that everybody always brings up is the hospitality. So they're very just, they'll open their door for you at like midnight and have a table ready for you. It's like all pretty much to that level. So the hospitality, the warmth, it's beautiful. Armenia is gorgeous. The nature.
What does it look like? Like the hills or the mountains? Like what's the beauty?
It's mountainous. It's mountainous. There's rivers. There's lakes. There's trees, and it's just very foresty and mountainy. So that's like the topography, pretty much. And then everything is super natural. So all the produce, like you can taste it. You can see that like
it was just picked yesterday.
Yellow.
It was just picked yesterday at the farm outside of Yerevan. That type of vibe.
It really is.
Okay.
That is how it is. And they bring the vans in the morning, and the fruit places are opening, and that I miss that for sure. You don't really have that because it's European in those ways. The other thing that's very different from here, there's a lot, but like Yerevan is designed in a circle. So everything leads to the center. Whereas like LA doesn't have one center. Yeah. It has many little
very
pockets.
Disjointed. Yeah, totally.
Very disjointed, very destination oriented. Yep. Here. Over there, it was like, walk down to the cafe with your laptop and your book and like work for a few hours, and then a friend comes and, oh my God, hey, and we're going here later. Okay, it just, the access of that was really easy. So in one day, you've lived many different little lives in this very small place.
Yes.
And then, just like how Europe is, they work to live. So here we live to work. Mm-hmm. Over there, they work to live. It's very day to day.
So the job is just like, it's a means to an end there. That's what, yeah. It's really what they do. It's all about family and the community. And that's what's most important there.
People have time for each other there. They take their time. They're not rush. Obviously, it's changing in terms of like, we are becoming more cosmopolitan in Yerevan. Like all of that is happening. And there are people who are really, hustling, whatever. But overall, I think we're still more European than anything else. And people take their time. They really talk to you. And then also, there is a little bit of struggle with understanding boundaries. It's just like,
people get involved in your business.
Well, it can be that. extreme, but also like, what do you mean you have to go sleep early? Like, we're still hanging out. What do you mean you have to wake up and go to the gym? Like, come on, like that kind of thing. So there is a little bit of like, let's just be in the moment. You know, they live every day very for that day. And I love that experience too, because I don't think it's very like that here. I think over here, because it's destination oriented and there's more structure, it's like from this time to this time, I'm doing this, and then I'm going to move on.
So Yerevan, the reason why somebody would go there who's not Armenian is to enjoy the beauty of the topography, the scenery, the simplicity of the city and how it's easy to get around, the great hospitality of the people who live there, and the amazing fresh, like farm to table foods that are in the city. Yeah.
And it's fun.
It's fun nightlife.
It's fun over there. It's just, like, and the simplest things become fun. And there's a lot of ritual, you know, we have a lot of ritual with toasting at the table. And one dinner is like a 3-4 hour affair because we're going around, and there's a lot of like meaning brought into every moment, and there's presence. And when you go to the villages, they really live a slow life. They're really connected to the nature and the animals. And it's also a 4-season play. Like it's, you experience every season fully. So that in and of itself connects you with the cycles of the earth. And there is a way that I've experienced going there. My nervous system was able to relax in a different way than over here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Because when I think of LA, it's like it's so spread out here that like going to see somebody, you know, it could be like a 2-hour round trip drive, you know, so it just doesn't happen as much. Whereas like, it sounds like Yerevan, you see somebody, you want to go see somebody, it's like 5 minutes outside of your apartment and you're there at the cafe and all these other people are meeting up there. It's very convenient.
Yeah, and people are always like walking, and like there's a lot of this culture, the bak. So bak in Armenian is like the yard. So the buildings will have a bak, and then, you know, if you've lived in the building for a long time, which most of them have, and it's generational, then the kids grow up in that bak in the yard playing with each other. So even over this summer, there were these kids that lived in the buildings, and, you know, they don't have phones. They're young. They're 5, 6, 7. And so one of the kids would go downstairs and be calling like his name to come down and play. And I would hear that every day, you know, around the same time. So that, and then the grandpas, like they walk up and down the street talking, or they'll play backgammon, or the grandma. It's just, there's a provincial feeling. It's very like in Beauty and the Beast when she's like going through the town, there goes the baker, that whole thing. That's what it was like being there. And that's something that I think really draws people in, because it's everywhere. Every place in Yerevan pretty much is like that, especially as you get closer to the center. There's just a lot of life.
Amazing. I saw that on, like, you were at an event recently, and like speaking about like the little kids that don't have phones or anything, but like thinking about technology, like isn't technology something that's really kind of booming with Armenia? Like you are working on some sort of AI, something, like what's going on with all that?
Yeah, so there's actually a foundation. It's called Fast Foundation. A little plug for them. They are working to bring AI education into the everyday curriculum across Armenia.
So they would learn how to develop AI systems in school in Armenia. Oh, wow.
Exactly. I think that is something we have going for us for sure, the technology. And there's different little centers over the time, like Tumo, and that
What's
I know
Tumo?
co-op. Tumo does. They've been doing technology stuff too. It's a separate center, though. They have a few of them in Armenia. So the difference
is that a company or is that a?
It's an organization.
Okay.
I have to also. I may not be quoting everything
Okay.
exactly, but it's called Tumo Center, but that's more of like an after school thing. So the difference with FAST is that they're wanting to implement it into the daily curriculum so that it becomes something that's a must. So by the time they hit a certain age, they're educated, and then it's essentially attacking a problem at the root so that once they're at an age to be employable, they have all of this education and they can land really good jobs, and they can also bring programs and systems and maybe manufacturing or whatever happens into Armenia itself. So that's and they were having their gala, and then we were doing content for them. It was really cool. We were like interviewing people on the red carpet, and that was like a cool thing to be a part of. And they had some videos of the kids in their programs that they were showing, and it was a really cool thing to kind of witness that this is happening and that it's well underway. And the future, not to sound like those people, but the children are our future, and this is, I think we all know how important AI is, and if we have any chance of just getting ahead of it, then I'm all for it.
Yes. Yeah, because Armenia is like this landlocked country that doesn't, necessarily, like, there's no major ports. So, like, what is the thing that's going to, what is the commerce of Armenia? Like, what is their economy?
Right. You got to invest in the people. I feel like that's
the greatest
commerce.
That's the greatest. Yeah, that's like the greatest value of Armenia is the people. And so, yeah, wow.
And they're cool. Like
the Armenian people.
Yeah, like they are so cool. The style of Yerevan when I've been there, the music, there's just so much, and it's kind of just starting to really come out. It's always been there. But I think with technology and social media and this digital, I don't want to call it a digital revolution, but whatever age we're in now, Pisces, Aquarius, whatever it is, it's starting to really come out in more tangible ways, and there's recognition for it. And I think what I saw over there is that when people are given the chance to show up, and whether it's in a conversation or something that they're making or an idea, when they have the proper tools in place, like, for example, a new laptop, something as arbitrary as something like that, then it's the ability and the talent is there. It's just when the infrastructure and the resource hasn't been, how can it be possibly shown? We did this project over the summer. It was really cool. We went to these very obscure villages near the Sevan region, we have a big lake there, Sevan Alich. And we went and found kids that played any kind of instrument or sang. And we went through the countryside and we recorded them. And we also recorded the sound. So like rocks and leaves and water. And so the whole concept is the sounds of the village. And there's all these talented kids, but maybe their village is too small and their music program got shut down. Or maybe, I don't know, the parent doesn't see the value in funding music education for them. And so now we're hopefully with this studio that I'm working with, it's like we want to create more opportunities to maybe bring those kids to Yerevan down the line, or, you know, to connect them or to get their voices and their sounds out. And who knows what leads to what. But it's things like that, I think, that personally I'm passionate about when it comes to becoming the bridge between Armenia and the outside world, and how we can continue, because we don't know what's going on in the region land-wise, but we can continue to invest in the future.
What do you mean by that last statement?
Like geopolitically,
Yes.
There's so much up in the air
Because of what's happening in Artsakh.
That area, and also just the neighboring, you know, the countries.
That people might be trying to invade Armenia, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're pretty open about that. That's not like a secret, which is a trip to hear that.
It's crazy.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And so you can't just throw your hands in the air.
Yeah.
But you also can't, like, there's only so much as a civilian you can do when it comes to those kind of matters.
What can you do?
I think my personal approach is like grassroots stuff and it's, again, continuing to develop what it is that you do have. You know, I think this is a very Aquarian way of thinking about it, but it's like yelling and screaming at the old structure to change doesn't really get us as far as creating something so cool that it almost renders the old one obsolete.
Yes. That's the Pluto and Aquarius vibe right there. Yeah. So what is that path?
I think that looks different for everybody.
How does it look for you?
I think I didn't realize how much, and this might be like the Virgo parts coming in, but like structure, organization, the stuff that like a producer kind of does, making sure that things are in order. I think optimization is like a little passion I have, optimizing the systems, even just at work. Like a lot of it for me is consistently like, and in general, like looking towards where I want to be, where this thing has to be, where the system has to be, and working backwards from it. So I think for me, it's like using the skills I have, and also I think that you have more impact when you can be at the intersection of things. So if it's AI and it's music, if it's education and music, if it's, you know, when that happens, I think the thread of impact is more than if you just kind of hone in. And some people are about just like, let's hone in and let's just be really myopic about the focus, and that works, you know, like those savants or masters of the craft. But I think also just to like tie this all into the astrology piece, and how you asked, like, how has this practically helped your everyday? The first step has been, who am I? And accepting who I am and what my astrological blueprint looks like. And then leveraging those parts of myself instead of fighting with myself because I'm not this way, or I should be more of this. And I don't know how many people can relate to that, but I think we compare ourselves a lot, and not comparing has been such a godsend, and being like, well, this is how I operate. And maybe, again, the Aquarian parts, it's like, maybe I'm meant to make things happen that haven't been done before, or create a system or a way that hasn't. And maybe all of this can beautifully be integrated together and flow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And flow through. Yes. What happened with the music that you recorded at the village? What'd you do with that?
So basically we recorded all the sounds along our journey and the kids. And then it's also like a visual program, or I don't know how to say it. Like it's like a piece that will be released on YouTube of our journey. So it's both visual and audio. It kind of is like a little, like a docu-series type of piece. There's also a song that came out of the sounds. So it's all of these things tied together.
So it's being edited and put together right now.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to see that.
Released.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know when it's going to be released?
I don't know. I don't know any release dates.
Yeah.
I just kind of went in and
You're
was
not
like,
involved in the post-production.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you working on right now?
So right now I have a few things. I'm always working on music kind of in the background.
For like your own personal, not for Moon's Creative.
My own personal. Yeah, we don't do any music production and things like that. My own personal is music, and that always just kind of is happening. And then I also have a lot of like poetry written and some long form stuff. So I'm slowly but surely working on putting that together
in your Virgo moon sort of way.
For a first book.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that, and I have no projection of timeline for that yet.
Good.
But that's something that's being worked on. So those are like two big.
So some music projects and putting the poetry together in a book. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are your passion projects.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Moon's Creative, what's the story of that name? Are they astrology people, or they just like the moon?
So, I don't know. I think the name was just something that like maybe came from a brainstorm. So I came in to working with them about a few years after they had kind of like established. And funny enough, the one person who started the company, he is a Pisces too. So there's like, it's very interesting to have the duality of the masculine and the feminine. And
because he's a man.
Would say he's a man.
Pisces
I would say I'm the astrology plug. Like I'm the one who's like bringing that stuff in. And he always says like, I never used to really pay attention or take it seriously, but when I see the way that you put so much time and energy, then it makes me go, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, okay, there's something here.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Your people are starting to notice you from in your yeah.
I think it also has to do with, and this, I think some people have this from an earlier age and some people it develops more. It's like when you talk about, you're a perfect example because like you're the poster person for this, but like when you talk about something with conviction and you don't waver on it and it's not a persuasive energy, but you just are so sure of it and you know it to be true that it's almost hard for the people sitting across from you not to at least be a little intrigued. I think that's like what is behind when it seems like I do a party trick, because I'll do like a little mini reading on someone, or they'll ask me, tell me about myself. And then I'll say a few things and then they're like, whoa. And I'm like, listen, at this point, it's just how it is. So I think like that has a lot to do with getting people to be interested at all, or just there's no more convincing happening. It's just, I'm going to present you with this and you take it how you want.
Yes. Love that. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Well, was there anything on our list that we didn't cover that we wanted to talk about? I'm trying to think.
No, I wrote some things out last night and we have seemed to cover them.
Okay, cool. Well, what would you like to leave our audience with? Like what words of wisdom or insight or inspiration would you like to share with the Weekly Transit audience?
That's so good. I think that something that comes up is that we are all still discovering ourselves, and this is a never-ending journey, and that's the beauty of this whole experience and why we come to Earth is just to continue to learn about yourself. And I think astrology is a really cool and kind of optimized tool and pathway to do that. And also, I love how you can get so detailed and in depth, and I'm still learning like the aspects, and I this is just really the beginning. And so if you're a curious person, this is a great, it's not even a hobby. It's a great extra lens to have to continue to learn.
Amazing, Aleen. Well, thank you so much for your time, your energy. I'm so grateful to have you on the show. So grateful to know you. And it's an honor to work with you. So, and to hear more about Armenia and all of that as well really means a lot to me personally. So thank you for taking the time today to share your experiences and insight with us. And we'll look forward to reconnecting some other time.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's such an honor. And I love being here. I love talking to you. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tejerian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the